Well, hello, folks. Great to have you with us here, and I trust this is going to be helpful. Something is going on that has not happened, as far as I know, in my lifetime within the Roman Catholic Church. Now, let me start out by saying, and every Sunday we recite the Nicene Creed, and we say that we believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. So right from the get-go, I consider myself Catholic, but I'm not a Roman Catholic. And so when I use the term Catholic, you'll almost always hear me say Roman Catholic, because the Roman Catholic Church obviously takes orders, if you will, from the Pope in Rome. And the Pope in Rome is the highest Roman Catholic official, and he is officially the vicar of Christ, or the representative of Christ on the earth. So for the Roman Catholics, they don't have Christ here anymore, but they do have the Pope. Now, I realize no matter what I say, some Roman Catholic could take exception to it. However, that is my understanding. He's called the Pope, the Papa, the Vicar of Christ. Vicar of Christ being the vicarious one. A vicarious one is one who stands in place of another. And that is the Roman Catholic Pope, as I understand it. So this is what's happening, and this is from LifeSite News. And again, this has not happened as far as I know in my lifetime. There's going to be a trial. From LifeSite News, Vatican charges Archbishop Vigano with schism, or splitting, for denial of the legitimacy of Pope Francis. Now, this is interesting to me because it's hard for me. In my experience, I run into Roman Catholics from time to time. Some of them will show up, for example, doing abortion work, and I'll run into them and talk to them. And it's very difficult for me to find a hardcore defender of Pope Francis. I actually don't remember ever running into one of them. In fact, I met I believe it was a priest who was all decked out in his, priestly garb. And one of the things he said, first thing was, I do not believe that this particular Pope, meaning Francis, is legitimate. But here's the summary. The Vatican's doctrinal office summoned Archbishop Vigano to appear before an extrajudicial penal trial on June 20th over accusations of schism, again, separation or splitting, owing to, quote, a denial of the legitimacy of Pope Francis, rupture of communion with him, and rejection of the Second Vatican Council. Now, you'll first notice here that we are not calling this archbishop on trial for anything that is necessarily scriptural in nature. Instead, you're committing what looks like the ultimate crime here: denial of the legitimacy of Pope Francis. Now, in Protestant circles, we do this from time to time ourselves, right? We say if a certain pastor has done certain things, that are, shall we say, in opposition to Titus 1 and 1 Timothy 3, for example, because there are definite requirements there for a pastor. We say if a pastor has given up on him, on those requirements, then he's no longer a pastor. Apparently, you cannot do that with a pope. From what I can tell, there is nothing a pope can do except die to be removed. In other words, once they've set him up, again, my understanding, you can't get rid of him. In any case, they're willing to get rid of this Archbishop Vigano, however. Now, Vigano has been complaining about Pope Francis for years. This is something I've been following, and I thought it would come to this at some point. I thought there would be some kind of a coming to a head here. So Vigano is being called to account for his opposition to Pope Francis. Now, here's a little more about it. The Vatican's Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, DDF, has instigated an extrajudicial penal trial against the Archbishop. In an email signed by Monsignor John Kennedy of the Dicastery's disciplinary section and sent to the Italian Archbishop, meaning Vigano, who served as, and again, this guy Vigano is no slouch. He served as papal nuncio to the United States from 2011 to 2016. In other words, he basically represented the Vatican to the United States. I mean, that's pretty high up here. The dicastery summoned Vigano to the Vatican on June 20th that he may, quote, take notice of the accusations and evidence concerning the crime of schism. Again, this has to happen. You can't accuse the Pope. That makes sense from a Roman Catholic perspective. He's Christ's representative on earth. And again, my understanding is that once the cardinals, or whoever they are, choose a Pope, they're basically standing in the place of God, and God doesn't make mistakes. And you cannot say that those who chose this Pope made a mistake without at the same time accusing God of having made a mistake. In any case, he's got to take notice of these accusations and evidence against him, and they notified him of a public statement which resulted in a denial of the elements necessary to maintain communion with the Catholic Church, denial of the legitimacy of Pope Francis, rupture of communion with him, and rejection of the Second Vatican Council. We won't talk too much about Vatican II. There are some people that claim that Vatican II changed the Mass, and there are some Roman Catholics who believe that Vatican II erred in some way. Vigano responses, and he defends himself, and he states this: in the face of the dicastery's accusations, I claim as successor of the apostles. You see what he's doing here? He's saying, I'm actually representing the succession of the apostles. Perhaps not Peter, but the church doctrine. I actually represent that. I claim as successor of the apostles to be in full communion with the Roman Catholic Apostolic Church. In other words, I'm the one that's in communion, not this Pope. Full communion with the Roman Catholic Apostolic Church, with the magisterium of the Roman pontiffs, or the Roman, essentially the Roman popes in the past, and with the uninterrupted doctrinal, moral, and liturgical tradition which they have faithfully preserved. Now, he's very aggressive, and he's not backing down. I mean, not even close. He's not even trying to sound like he's trying to make peace here. Regarding the accusations against him, quote, as an honor, Vigano stressed his desire to repudiate, reject, and condemn the scandals, errors, and heresies of Jorge Mario Bergoglio, Pope Francis, who manifests an absolutely tyrannical management of power, exercised against the purpose of that. Excuse me, let me try that again. He manifests. This is Vigano saying this about Bergoglio, Francis. He manifests an absolutely tyrannical management of power, exercised against the purpose that legitimizes authority in the church, an authority that is vicarious, there's our word, of that of Christ, and of such must obey him alone. So Vigano is saying here, we have a Pope who actually disobeys Christ. Now, what are we going to do? LifeSite News goes on to say, after arguing that, quote, no Catholic worthy of the name can be in communion with this Bergoglian church, because it acts in clear discontinuity and rupture with all the popes of history and with the Church of Christ, end of quote. Vigano then asked Catholics to, quote, pray that the Lord will come to the aid of his church and give courage to those who are persecuted for their faith. Okay, so one thing I want you to notice here, Vigano does not call Francis the Pope. You notice he never calls him Pope Francis. He won't even recognize him as the Pope. He just calls him Jorge Mario Bergoglio. So this is, again, I have not seen this. It may have happened in my lifetime. I don't ever remember it happening before. Now, as a prediction here, he will be thrown out of the church for his crimes against the church. But see, what Rome has to answer for is this. Are they really saying that a pope can be basically a demon-possessed man and still be the vicar of Christ? And I think they have to say yes. It doesn't matter who he is. As long as he's been chosen by the official representatives of the church, cardinals as I understand it, could be archbishops also, but as I understand it's cardinals, that choose him, there's nothing can be done. They couldn't have made a mistake no matter how bad the guy is. Now, in response to this LifeSite News article, I want to read to you what I think. And I think this particular letter writer here, or responder, gets the dilemma perfectly. And she says this. She says, of course, Cardinal Vigano is in schism if he is denying that Pope Francis is the Pope. And from what I can tell, that is exactly what he is denying. And she's saying that he's in schism if he's denying that he's the Pope. She goes on to say, Pope Francis is the head of the Roman Catholic Church, the true successor of St. Peter. It is church teaching that the infallibility of the faithful would prevent a condition in the church whereby a false pope would be accepted and hailed by the vast majority of the faithful without a public division in the church hierarchy itself. In other words, saying what I said earlier, it's impossible. We can't make a mistake here. This has to be the right pope. You know why? Because he's the pope. She goes on to say, there's no public division in the hierarchy of the church that is being battled out in Rome. In other words, we need a big fight. We can't just have a pope who obviously goes away from the scriptures or Catholic tradition, if you will, or Catholic dogma, or the councils. It doesn't really matter how bad someone says he is, because if he was really that bad, then there'd be a big fight. And since it's only Vigano, it just doesn't matter. She goes on to say, if there were, it would be a gathering of the hierarchy, and another man would be making the claim to Pope, not being in union with the Pope, denying his authority to teach, govern, and sanctify the faithful, is the definition of schism. The definition of being in union with the church is being in union with a bishop who is in union with the Pope in Rome. This is, as far as I'm concerned, this is exactly the problem. It's ultimately about the Pope. It's ultimately not, and I'm sure Roman Catholics would argue with me here, but I would vigorously oppose that argument. It's not about what Catholic doctrine is. It's not. It's just not. It's not about the history of Roman Catholic doctrine. See, that's what Vigano is appealing to. He's saying we have a history here, and this Pope is not in line with that history. And this writer is saying, we're Roman Catholics. We got a Pope. And you know what? Unless there's a great big, shall we say, opposition, unless there's a great big rebellion, what you see is what you get. And so this is Vigano, and this is one of the things he said in response to what he was said. He says, I repudiate, reject, and condemn the scandals, errors, and heresies of Mario Bergoglio. And then he goes on to say, again, using his given name, he goes on to say that the man has, he railed against Francis' welcome for undocumented migrants, his, quote, delirious encyclicals, unquote, about climate change and authorization of blessings for same-sex couples, and accused him of promoting his allies. My point is, what if it's all true? Doesn't matter. He's the Pope. Now, we have said as Protestants, either the Bible judges us or we judge the Bible. My guess is that in this trial, however long or short it lasts, the Bible itself will be a non-factor. And it will come down to, do you, as an archbishop, have to be in communion with the Pope, no matter whether he's demon-possessed or no matter who he is? It could be anyone. I have a crazy idea of Rome one day. I mean, given the times, electing a tranny that they think is a man as a woman. Now what? I mean, okay, that's crazy. That's nuts. Anyway, well, maybe not so nuts. Anyway, that's what it's going to come down to. And Vigano will maintain his opposition to this particular Pope Francis. If you do a bit of a of an online search, you will find that there is tremendous opposition. It's not widespread necessarily in the Roman Catholicism, but the opposition to Pope Francis is very deep. So if you're going to weigh the votes instead of count them, if you were to count the votes, Francis, I'm sure, still has a lot of support. If you were to weigh the votes, in other words, the intensity of the votes, you would find that the opposition to Francis runs very deep. So this is a huge scandal in Rome, and I don't know if this is going to split Rome or not. I don't think it will. I don't think there's just enough opposition. I do believe that Rome has been compromised for so many years with so many really wicked, sinful people who have targeted Rome and have gotten themselves in positions of power that it's just going to continue to be an apostate church. But again, Rome can never even recognize herself as an apostate church because they are the true church. So it doesn't matter. You see the problem here. It doesn't matter what they do. They can take the Bible out tomorrow and stamp on it. It doesn't matter. They're the true church. Again, we judge the Bible, or the Bible judges us. No third way. Well, I hope you found this helpful today. And I hope you will, like the psalmist, learn to love every word of God.